Hi everyone, my name is Tochko Kora. Welcome to another episode of Growthclinicc podcast. On today's episode, we have Alex Matas, who has over a decade experience in audience building. He's a writer, speaker, author, coach, and an illustrator. In this episode, we discuss staying relevant on social media in the long term, building your digital audience, selecting the right platform to use, and the best ways to approach your clients on social media. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. So how are you doing, Alex?
I'm very well, man. Thank you for the introduction. It's good to finally meet you. And thanks.
Yeah, I've been seeing your content for a few months, about 6 months now. You're one of the first accounts I saw on Twitter. I think you had like 22k followers at that time when I saw you. You're on 24k followers now, which is quite
growth
impressive.
Is not as but your growth is way quicker than mine, I think. So kudos to you for overtaking me in a sense in terms of the speed. You're doing really well, man.
I focus. The reason I grew that quickly was I put my 100% focus on growth, which is in a sense is a bit overkill because I wasn't doing any other thing. I was just focusing on Twitter growth. But now, with this podcast,
I love that.
Yeah, with this podcast, I have other things to do, and with my writing too, I have other things to do. So I can't really focus on growth anymore. So.
But it really goes to show that, where you put your attention is where you're going to get the most results, right? And for me, over the last 6 months, my attention has not really been so much on growth. It's been more on connecting with individuals. And it kind of aligns very well with the coaching work that I do and the consulting stuff that I do, which is my kind of bigger priority right now. So for me, I look at Twitter as a really nice, useful way of accessing and introducing myself to people kind of one-to-one, as opposed to focusing on massive growth. So the growth came earlier on, and then I've sort of let it kind of do its thing more organically. And but I also see the value in growth as well. If I can do both, then fantastic.
Doing both is like the silver lining. If you can get both together, build your connection, get clients on Twitter, and grow, and you'll be unstoppable.
Exactly. Exactly. It's an amazing resource, man. I think you found the right thing. I think Twitter has recently, for me, seen something of a resurgence, because it seemed to me as if there was a kind of a lull, because I've been a member since 2008, 2009, and it was great for a few years, and it kind of lost my interest for whatever reason, and I sort of took the foot off the gas and I stepped away from it, and I came back over the last year or so, and I've realized it's just a gold mine of relationships and all kinds of stuff.
In the past 6 months, I've been surprised at the kind of people I've been able to reach out to, because I won't have been able to talk to these people. Like you, for example, I would have been able to talk to you without having such following on Twitter. So that's the network you build on Twitter is very important.
Yeah, and I feel a little bit sorry for people who haven't really discovered Twitter properly, right? It's like, you need to find this place. You're missing out, because it is something of a party right now.
Yeah. So before
connection.
Yeah. So before Twitter, what were you growing? What platform were you focused on?
To be fair, I mean, Twitter, me being on Twitter coincides quite well with the growth of my career, full stop. It goes back how long? Over a decade now since I've been a member of Twitter. So looking back at when I first got into, working online as an illustrator and working as a writer, working as a coach, it all kind of aligned pretty much with Twitter. I wasn't really on, I think, Twitter kind of 2009. I guess that's like 3 years actually after I started working as an illustrator. So I'm trying to think, what was I doing before then? I guess it was mostly Facebook, and probably a month or something on MySpace, something like that, back in the day. Yeah, very briefly. I'm trying to think what else. Maybe a little bit of time on LinkedIn. And for me, most of my online time back in sort of 2006, 7, 8, when I was growing my illustration design practice, was spent on a site called iStock Photo. Don't know if you've heard of it. It's a place where you can, as a photographer or an illustrator, upload art and designs and photos, and you can sell your products through that site.
Yeah.
So I wasn't so big on social media until about a couple of years into that, and Twitter really was the big one for me. That was the first place that I started really making a mark and making connections beyond my friendship circle on Facebook.
So, would you say you've been growing your accounts since 2009, or it's just a couple of
In
years?
some, yeah, more or less. Look, with a lot of downtime and a lot of focus taken off the ball, like looking elsewhere and kind of. But actually, I think I have been pretty much consistent since 2009 for sure. Like sometimes I may have tweeted like twice in a month, for example, right? And other times, several times a day.
Mhm.
So it's varied a lot. It's been much more consistent over the last couple of years.
So, what will you say your year by year growth has been like? Like your decision to choose this particular social media platform, like you said in 2009, you focused on Twitter for like 3 years. So that's to like 2011. So
Yeah.
what made you switch to another platform, then come back?
Um, I think I just didn't at the time see the potential for Twitter at the time. I think I probably wasn't using it as well as I could use it.
Yeah.
I wasn't writing threads and things like that, for example. I was doing a lot of following of other people, that kind of let's follow a ton of people and see who follows back. So I was getting a lot of relevant people in my sphere, i.e., creatives. So at the time, I had a blog that I was writing to help other creatives grow and build their businesses.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my Twitter work, a lot of my social media work was focused on let's see how I can build my creative audience as quickly as possible. So I was doing a lot of like kind of semi, black hat, gray hat, whatever you want to call it, stuff involving doing a lot of following. So it's kind of not the most kosher approach to growth in the early days. So I built up a lot of people very quickly, but that led to having pretty crappy engagement. So it wasn't always the most resourceful source of engagement for me. So that's probably why I lost interest at certain points, is because it wasn't a consistent growth. It was like, little spontaneous connections here and there with people, but
Mhm.
the real engagement has only really been more recently. So this is down to me really changing my strategy and putting more time into engaging with others and sharing more about story and that kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
being much more focused on this. So it's kind of been something of a dormant account for years. I would kind of I'd have quite a lot of followers, but a lot of them weren't really focused. A lot of them weren't really listening.
Mhm.
So it wasn't driving me as much as it could have done if it was much more engaged. So that's probably why I lost a little bit of interest and then came back.
Right now, I feel like there's a lot of on and off on social media, like for creators. How do you manage to be consistent over the years? Because it's really not easy. Like as a
Yeah.
writer, I get other let's say I get a project which takes away my time, and I won't have the energy or the time to focus on creating content anymore because I have this gig that is taking my focus away. So how do you manage to create content consistently? Because you've been out there for quite a while, since 2009, this 2022.
Yeah.
That's over, I'm not good at math, but 13 years, I think. Well,
Yeah. It's a
yeah.
long time.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, first of all, you got to find a way to, logistically squeeze time for social media and time for content creation into your day. And, there's only going to be a certain amount of time that you can dedicate to that. So if you have a ton of work that you've created for yourself, maybe you've taken on, many clients, then inevitably you're going to have less time to enjoy the content creation and to just have the space and the mental bandwidth to be able to spend time doing it. So just logistics is obviously a big thing, and you have to manage your time in that sense. And it's going to be a lot harder for someone who has a ton of clients and a ton of other projects and other things that they're getting excited about, that can very easily sway them away. So that's the first bit. And for me, I've always prioritized creating space in my day to dedicate to content creation. I've always enjoyed content creation. I've
Mhm.
always seen the value in it. And I think that's another reason why I've stuck with it, is because I have a strong purpose behind why I would want to stay on something like Twitter, or why I'd want to stay, even though I left kind of for a bit, but I still kept it up in some form or another, because I always saw the overall value. There's it's kind of priceless to be able to connect yourself to so many potential people. I mean, that alone is huge. So to let yourself detach from that seems to me crazy. If you to leave a whole month to go without writing or sharing something, to me seems very counterproductive, and kind of a shame to detach yourself from the opportunity that is on social media. And it's constantly growing. I've seen so many changes over the years in terms of people benefiting from social media. Like it's huge.
Don't you worry that you become irrelevant because you've been there for a while? So, and there are so many people that are falling off. So what is your battle
Yeah,
strategy against becoming irrelevant?
it's a good question, man. Yeah, it's always on the back of one's mind, especially for people who've been around for a while and they had a certain strategy that may have worked for them for 6 months or a year, but things are constantly shifting and evolving on social media, which is part of the reason I'm excited to stay with it, because you're always learning new ways of doing things, and it keeps you as a creative, as a content creator, on your toes. And that's another reason that I love it, is that it's always testing you. And you might have someone who's like, yeah, I've got it sorted. I know exactly. I've beaten Twitter. I know how to do it. And then the next day they change the algorithm, or something shifts, and then you're lost again. So it's a great guide for you, and a reminder for you as a creator to constantly be aware of the changes. And in terms of avoiding becoming irrelevant, I think just simply being aware of that being a possibility is enough, because you're going to inevitably find creative ways to move past that and overcome that. If for example, if you feel that you're becoming irrelevant and you see the engagement going down and you see the lack of interest starting to take shape, then anyone who's wise and aware enough to see that is going to start creating and experimenting and trying different things to see how to shift the attention back and how to create more engagement again. So I guess having your finger on the pulse of how responsive your audience is to you is the best way to test for that. You can feel it, especially if you check in every day. You'll know, are people interested in what I'm sharing, or are people starting to lose interest, right? And that's I think a skill that maybe not everyone has. Like, I think the real winners in this are the ones who are able to see and really get a good sense for what their followers are, kind of how they're responding.
So,
What do you think on that? I'm keen to hear your input on the irrelevancy thing.
yeah, I think remain relevant. I think you need to actually live a life outside Twitter. I think I wrote a thread about it today or yesterday, that the greatest social media growth strategy is to have a life outside, because at times people get tired of
Yeah.
hearing the self-help content. Like, we hear it every time. So it's like, who are you outside social media? Who are you outside your self-help suite? Who are you outside your uh, marketing content? People want to see these things, and
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
when when they see you go through the different phases, stages of life, they become like more attached to your brand. They become invested in your brand, which is actually what we all need. When your
Mm-hmm.
these are when you build your super fans. Your super fans are people who will follow you throughout, and you can't get super fans without showing them who you really are, building trust, and telling them
Yeah.
your story. But the thing here
Yeah.
is, not everybody has the confidence, the traits to share their personal stories on the internet, which I
Mm.
like, yeah, which is the reason why introverts suffer the most on social media. I think so, because personally it's not easy. I'm a very private person. It's not easy for me to share my personal accomplishments or my personal stories, even with my friends. You need to actually
Mm.
be in my inner circle, like the 1% of the 1% of my friendship circle, to actually get the gist of what is happening in my life. So, what advice you think introverts can like cultivate to be able to share their life on social media?
Yeah, I love your points. But first of all, I think I'm going to need to challenge the idea that it's introverts who are suffering the most in terms of having the vulnerability to share
Mm-hmm.
stuff about their personal lives.
Yeah.
I, I, I see why you went there. I get that. But I would also say that social media is now opening up an opportunity for introverts more than ever to have the confidence to share stuff that they otherwise wouldn't have shared, out in public, on a stage, speaking with people. So I think it's probably more about people who have some kind of resistance around being vulnerable about their personal lives. And I don't think that necessarily only affects introverts
Yeah.
predominantly. I think it affects people who are unwilling to be vulnerable. And I think that covers both extroverts and introverts. But I get that, and there's probably a lot of introverts. You're right, who feel unwilling to share the more personal stuff. Just like any of us, it's always a bit cringy to kind of go towards
Yeah.
that that painful stuff that you don't really want to share. But
Mm-hmm.
but you're right, that's the kind of stuff that people want to hear about you. They want to hear your story. They want to hear your vulnerable moments. They want to hear the struggles that you went through. So in terms of encouraging people to do more of that, I would say do it in small steps, right? You
Mm-hmm.
don't have to write a thread about, your, problems growing up in great, painful detail as your first thread, right? You can
Mm-hmm.
start small. You can probably, that's the beauty of Twitter. You can share a short tweet about some little mini story, perhaps, you struggled, on the weekend, I don't know, trying to meet a girl or something, and you had an issue on the date or something, and you can just kind of keep it to a little snippet and put that out. And by doing that, you will feel the little twinge of resistance to doing it, but you'll see that you survived it. You'll see that you
Yeah.
did it. You didn't die in the process. You probably had positive feedback because people love that kind of content, and you'll get a
Yeah.
nice hit of confidence, and you'll find that confidence grow. So I think taking small steps is probably a good strategy, but definitely worth doing. It's kind of a cathartic thing to do. It's a release, right? And you'll probably find that it feels like you're getting it off your chest by doing that kind of stuff, and it'll improve your engagement
Yeah.
inevitably.
I feel like the people who make it longest on social media are the guys who share their stories, and it made a lot of sense, like starting a little bit.
Mm.
Because like any relationship, you can't do everything on the first day. You can't meet a girl on the first date and ask her to marry you. She'll think you're crazy. So you have
Yeah,
to.
yeah,
There are different steps you need to follow to actually get her to fall in love with you and all of that. So it's the same way with social
yeah.
media. Mhm.
Yeah, there's definitely some parallels. Dating and relationship building and social media networking. And client creation. So there's many parallels.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
in terms of getting clients on social media, what is the strategy for doing that? How has it been so far?
So for me, I think it depends somewhat on what kind of service you're providing. And for me, for the last few years, I've been predominantly focused on my very unniched coaching practice. So I'm going a bit against the grain by not being particularly niche in the coaching work that I do. I've just found that it's worked better for me to take an interest in, well, basically approach people that interest me, who inspire me, and then see
Mhm.
how I can in some way help them in whatever their priority is. And that priority can vary a lot. So it tends to work better for me and the client that I give some space for opening up to where the focus is, as opposed to I'm going to help you with SEO because you're 42-year-old British male. I don't get that specific. So for me,
Yeah.
really, this is where it gets really tricky. But Twitter has been actually more recently a potential source for coaching clients, because previously I was doing a lot of um, networking through my inner circle, through the people that I knew from outside of social media. Many people were actually found through social media as well, so that's fair enough. Um, And yeah, it's just, as I said earlier, like it's been a great source of finding one-to-one connections. And for me, that's all I kind of need. I'm very lucky to have this audience already. So I have a lot of people that I can reach out to. And yeah, in terms of the actual process of doing it,
Mhm.
is that what you want to discuss a little bit more into? Just like how would you, for example, land a client through Twitter?
Yeah, you can talk about that.
Yeah. So my approach with my coaching work is to be very conscious about developing a longer term relationship with someone and finding a way to um, honor your interest in developing longer, lifelong relationships, as opposed to what most people do, which is to basically transmit to everybody that they're only in it for the short term. And that's a great way to push people away because they can see that it's not about the relationship, it's about you getting
Yeah,
money from somebody.
yeah,
So that's really worth being conscious about, and it's taken me many years to understand those dynamics and to really get a sense of what works with humans, and to first of all see people as opposed to your
yeah.
next paycheck. You know what I mean? So on something, I mean, Twitter is just it's a network like any other. You can call your circle of friends and network. It's a social network. It's just not online. You can
Mhm.
ultimately it's just a gathering of people. And so you want to approach it like you would approach anybody, in the street, at parties, whatever. You need to honor the idea that you're not necessarily going to get a sale immediately. You want to start just kind of getting to know someone. I think for me, curiosity is the big one. You just want to be curious about people and start getting to know people. And in a sense, you are seeing yourself not as you're not looking up at potential clients and seeing them as like, wow, this would be amazing to get this client. You're seeing people as peers, as people on the same level as you.
Yeah.
And ultimately you're kind of, especially when you get to a certain stage in your career where you have had many previous clients and you're doing really well, you want to see client creation as a process of kind of not only friendship making, which is the foundation, but you're auditioning people to work with you. That's a really nice frame. It's like, well, you are intriguing to me. We've gotten to know each other, but I'm not 100% sure you're right for me as a client. So that's the kind of frame of mind you want to have, the mindset you want to have going into conversations. Like, I guess, especially a little bit down the line, is like, well, let's have a call, for example, and let's get to know each other and see if we're on the same wavelength. And that's when you deliver value, if you can, depending on what service you provide, whether it be through just the conversation you have, or in my case, I tend to do a lot of demonstration coaching work, and then people get an experience of your work, and that's really crucial as well. So instead of saying, well, look, I do this, and you're selling all the features, and you're telling people about what you do and then trying to sell, that doesn't tend to land very well because people are not getting an experience of your work.
Yeah, that makes
So
sense.
this, yeah. Well, I mean, this is why it starts getting tricky if we're talking about all kinds of different freelance work,
Yeah.
because it's coaching work is different to writing and so on. But I could talk about this for a long, long time.
So, how long did you take it to get to figure out this strategy? Because I'm sure you didn't always use the strategy from day one.
No, this has just come through constant tweaking and constant reevaluation and constantly updating and upgrading my approach according to the people I speak to, according to the tweets I read, according to the books I read. Every time I read a new tweet, I'm like, I should do that. I should change that tiny little thing in my in
Yeah.
my strategy.
Hmm.
So it's constantly changing. It's really has been a work in progress since I started trying to sell anything.
Yeah. So, let's talk about your first 5 years. Where did you start right out of college and with a job, and you quit your job to focus fully on, the story, you quit your job to
Yeah.
focus fully on freelancing and Was that your story?
Not quite jumping into freelance straight after college. I did go to university in London. I studied geography.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized I couldn't do anything with geography that I could think of. So I decided to do a distance learning course in real estate, basically a master's course in real estate. That was a kind of part-time course. So that allowed me to spend some time exploring potentially getting into freelance work. So while I was studying for real estate, I was doing a lot of illustration and design work to sell on the internet. This is back in 2007, 8. And I was also working for a property magazine at the time, so as a kind of researcher. So it was all part-time stuff. And it took me about a year or so to upload enough illustrations on the website that I mentioned earlier to start bringing in decent income, enough to pay the rent in London, which was amazing at one point. That's since petered out a little bit because I haven't kept it up. But so that kind of got me into design work slowly but surely, and slowly various clients would approach me through that site, and I realized, hang on a sec, I can make a freelance thing of this. I don't need to just, I mean, obviously selling the illustrations would have made great residual passive income.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I was young and excited about getting into client work and quitting the other job. So I saw the people asking me to do work for them as an opportunity to jump into freelance work. So maybe a year and a half into adding these illustrations to this site, I decided to just jump 100% into illustration freelance. So I was about 24 and basically worked as an illustrator for the next 6, 7, 8 years, kind of full time.
Yeah. So, were there any mistakes that if you could go back in time, would have avoided? Do you think you made any mistakes at all?
I'm pleased to say I didn't make any mistakes.
That's crazy.
So I just got through just like zero mistakes, man. I just nailed it. No, of course I'm joking. Yeah, there were many mistakes, and I'm grateful for every one of them. I'm trying to think of some big mistakes. I mean, I think the big one was just not being consistent enough in my client creation. So I would inevitably through, you know, if I got a job through from a client, I'd be so happy that I got the job that I would coast and I would kind of relax and I wouldn't do any client reach out. And then I'd find the next month that no work was with me and I had no money. And it was a constant process of kind of roller coaster income that went on for way too long. And it is rooted really, when I look back, to just not being consistent. Even if things were going well, I should have continued the constant reach out, continual, consistent connecting with people and keeping the pipeline, so to speak, full. And that's something that I really struggled with for years. I had such an up and down experience as a designer. So it was not perfect. And then there were, the little things of, not sending a proper proposal and, little, forgetting to send the invoice or what little things that I could have improved on. But I think generally it was a big process of learning about relationship building. Relationships was the absolute key to all of it.
Relationship is actually very important because in the end, we are all selling to human beings. We're not selling to robots. So you have to understand that the next person is human before you try to sell to them. So how did you switch from your illustrations into writing? How did you transition into that?
Yes. So I was writing for most of the time, if not all of the time, I think, that I was an illustrator. So I did both. And I think my foray into writing was born through starting a blog. So I started a blog about a year into being an illustrator because I wanted to make passive income again through selling ebooks. So I had actually written, before even starting the blog, I wrote an ebook called 10 Steps to Powerful Self-Promotion for Creatives. Bit of a mouthful. And it was basically a book that I wanted to sell to other illustrators and other creatives to help them promote their business. And so I decided to write consistently through my own blog in order to promote the book over time. And this was actually in parallel to Twitter and stuff like that. So I would use Twitter to help launch the book, for example, and I would use Twitter and Facebook and other places to promote each article. And so I've written since, I think that was launched in 2009 when I joined Twitter. So a good, yeah. And then that blog lasted maybe 10 years, and it's since been replaced by just me writing on Medium and wherever I want to write.
Yeah. So would you say which platform gave you the best results in terms of selling your ebook?
Well, if I gave you a great answer, it would be irrelevant, I would say, because so much time has passed.
Yeah.
Right? But if I could take some useful pieces from that experience, I would say Twitter was definitely important for that. I used Twitter not only to sell through the tweets, but also to build my newsletter back in the day. So I was also giving away a free ebook to newsletter subscribers, and then I would sell the paid ebook through the newsletter. And I think looking back, that was probably the main I don't know, the thing that worked the best, including and actually the standalone blog was also promoted by mainly Twitter. So Twitter was really my savior back in the day, actually. And that's thanks to all my shady tactics of following a lot of people, which actually turned out to be really helpful.
Yeah. So you've been on the digital space since 2009 to now. So what do you think has changed? What are some strategies that have changed over then? Because some people might be using old strategies and getting frustrated that they are not seeing proper results.
Dang. Well, there's definitely strategies that are timeless, and I think that's what I always look towards when I'm looking to be a better networker, relationship builder, client builder. There are threads that go through time that haven't changed, and for me it's building trust, sharing lots of value, getting to know people, showing genuine interest in people, focusing on the kinds of people who fascinate you rather than trying to please everyone, and being okay with polarizing occasionally, and having some controversial ideas maybe without going over the top, and being specific in who you want to help. All of that stuff applies. It's like a kind of model, a template that can move from one social network to the other. And if you're not doing that kind of stuff, and you're not following that kind of invisible rule book that I think applies so well to marketing, then you're going to struggle. So that's why I always talk about the timeless stuff, because if we talk about more technical things, then tomorrow it might have already changed. So it's always changing, right? So tricky to go there. But there's probably other people who are better equipped talking about the kind of the technical approach, and how best to make use of these technologies.
So for people starting out now on social media, on audience building, because every day I see new accounts that open. Like today I saw an account that opened in December 2021. I was like, okay, this person is just starting on his journey. So what is your advice for that person in terms of building his account or his social media presence?
I would say take the long-term view and allow your passion for creating content to transcend the technology. You want to be thinking about your own long-term brand, your own long-term vision about what you want to create and what kinds of people you want to bring into your world. And you don't want to get too hung up on how to game any particular social network, because ultimately you're going to be in this for the long term. You want to have a long-term commitment. So even if Twitter dies tomorrow, which it might well do, you're perfectly okay with moving your brand, moving your content, moving your passion, so to speak, to wherever is needed of you. So I would say, look to the forest instead of the trees. I mean, trees are important too, but focus on the long-term vision, and focus on something that's going to keep you interested,
Yeah.
even if not every day is going to be exciting and fun. That's normal. That's fine.
Yeah,
But you
actually.
want to have something that's going to hold you. But even that's probably not quite accurate, because we can change angles whenever we want. So that's not even really that important. I would say find a way to enjoy it ultimately.
Yeah.
Otherwise you're going to lose faith, and constantly find a way to remind yourself of why it is important for you. You know, the purpose is key. Otherwise, you know, you're gonna see a tweet that you share and it'll have 0 likes, and you'll be like, well, I wanted to do this for likes. That's not a very good reason to do it initially, because then you're
Yeah.
always going to be disappointed. But if you're going to do it for something like self-improvement or improving your writing, even if nobody's listening, then you're going to much more likely stick to it. And that's been really helpful for me. It's just in the early days, for example, of writing all my articles, you know, I've written thousands of articles. The first 600 was basically written to nobody, right? And I could have easily quit.
Yeah.
And I kept writing, even though I got, you know, a frustrating amount of engagement, you know, like 2 claps on Medium and you know, like 1 comment and that kind of stuff. And it could have been really depressing if my barometer for success was, you know, you're doing well if people are liking your articles, or, you know, your kind of self-worth is reflected in how many people follow you, right? But it shouldn't be about that. It should be about how you see the process and the meaning in the process, and how it's going to, over time, so again, long-term view, how this is going to benefit you in the long term. And the long run is always made up of thousands of tiny experiments.
That makes so much sense, because I remember when I started writing on Medium in 2019, and I used to just write down my thoughts on Medium, and I would just have one listener, one reader. So I check this stats every day, which, looking at it now, is just a way to get your heart rate up. Just I'll get one reader, 2 readers on an article that I spend hours writing and editing. I'll get just 1 reader, and I'll be wondering, like, what am I doing wrong? It continued to, like, the following year, which was 2020, and I didn't quit because I actually enjoyed writing on Medium. It felt, when I published, it felt I had this calming effect, like, so it was like therapy for me. So I feel like that is one thing you should take in mind. Like, you should do something you enjoy. Not, you shouldn't start a YouTube channel because people told you you can become a millionaire having with a YouTube channel. You get frustrated in the process. And that is one thing I noticed about Twitter when I became active in June last year. There are so many accounts, the affiliate marketing accounts that are focused on running affiliates and posting affiliate links here and there. Those guys they are all about making money. And if that's your focus, on Twitter, you might succeed, but you might not last long. And I've seen it a lot. Like, so many people who I started with, who I was on less than 100K followers, they've quit Twitter because they just focus on money, which is not the right thing. I was speaking with Judge once scenarios some days back, and he was telling me how he didn't want to monetize his account to 8K followers, and that just shows how money shouldn't be your main focus when you're building your audience. And you've explained it quite clearly here today. So that makes sense. Money.
Yeah, you're right. I think it definitely reflects what I was saying. It's the same concept, right? Long-term view. Yeah.
So I went through your website and you said you're a quiet and shy teenager and somehow became a speaker. And how did you do that? How did you become a speaker? Because thinking about it, like,
well,
it should be terrifying for a quiet person.
Yeah. Well, that's not to say that people can't change the way they think. and the way they experience life. So when I was a teenager, I my thinking was different. I wasn't necessarily I don't think my shyness was necessarily a kind of reflection of a lifelong personality. That's what can terrify a lot of people, that they feel that they're trapped in any one kind of, in quotes, personality.
Yeah.
I think what was happening at the time, when feeling shy and feeling anxious to speak up in class and that kind of stuff, was more a reflection of my own thinking process. So I was just, I had thoughts around how speaking up in class was a terrifying thing, and I shouldn't reveal anything about myself too much. I should hide, and I should, my strategy for living was to hide and to keep quiet, right? So that that inevitably made me feel depressed as well, and it was a struggle, to be honest. So taking that kind of thought process and that strategy was not a helpful one. But I've since been able to step outside of that chaos of thinking and seen the world for what it is. As you mature, as you have more life experiences, you start hopefully realizing that all of this stuff we get wound up, as a kind of scared teenager, it's just nonsense. It's an illusion that we create in our heads, right? That creates this suffering. So I've since found it a lot easier through shifting my perspective and seeing the world as a much more positive, not scary place, and that includes other people. I see other people in a different way now, and that's made things like speaking a lot more easy, even though it's not always easy to step up on a stage. A lot of it's down to your own interpretation of what's going on. You could see it as, oh my God, this is a massive deal. I need to take it seriously. There are thousands of eyes looking at me. I don't know what to do. I'm gonna look stupid. You could think that way, or you could see your thinking for what it is, a bunch of lies, right? a bunch of nonsense, as always, and just see things for what it is. And as soon as you can see things for what they are, which is, oh my God, I get this amazing opportunity to connect with a lot of people and help them. You put the attention and focus on the group. It's like, it's not about me anymore. It's about, how can I help these guys? How can I inspire these people? And suddenly you lose all of that nervous tension. So that's what helped me, is just my shifting in perspective.
So what's the most nervous you've been in front of an audience?
Good question. It would have been when I was asked to speak in Barcelona about 6 years ago. And I knew that it was going to be a big conference. It's for a design conference. And I knew that it was going to be a big deal. And I was expecting to be speaking to like 200, 300 people. And then I went up there and kind of, I hadn't even prepared that well, because I was pretty inexperienced at the time, and I was finding all kinds of excuses because I was scared of doing the talk to avoid the preparation for the talk. So I didn't do much preparation, which is really stupid. So I turned up pretty unprepared, and I also realized that I wouldn't be speaking in the small room. I'd be speaking on the massive stage, the main stage, which was 2,000 people, right? Only 2,000. I mean, so obviously that knocked me quite hard, in the chest. I was pretty, that got the heart rate up. I hadn't really prepared. I had a pretty crappy, PowerPoint presentation that wasn't very good. And I had also been watching a couple of the previous talks by rock star creatives who were very good at speaking and had everything, sorted, and they were really funny, and it was really good talk. So I was up against a lot of talent. So I was pretty terrified. It didn't go terribly, but it was one of the worst experiences I think I've ever had.
For you to remember it, it must have been very bad.
Yeah, it wasn't. I mean, it was, looking back, it was I'm so happy that I did it, because it's such a big learning experience. But it wasn't particularly enjoyable for me at the time. But again, that taught me a ton. Mainly that I need to prepare my notes before I get on stage.
So, I asked my last guest this question. What do you think is the best strategy to use? Do you think it's best to focus on one platform first, or build different okay, for example, is it best to focus on Twitter first or focus on Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube at the same time? Which do you think gets the best results?
Oof. This has been a question that I've struggled with for the whole time. And, you know, the curious, creative, and, you know, busybody side of me wants to be on everything and wants to connect with as many people as possible and grow as many audience as possible. And it feels painful to say something like, okay, I'm going to focus only on one platform like Twitter and just completely ignore the other ones. That for me has been very difficult an idea. And what I've come to the conclusion of is that I think it's good to kind of to have a moderate presence on a lot of these platforms. I think there's so much opportunity in LinkedIn, in Medium, in YouTube, in podcasting, and all of this stuff. I think it just seems like a massive loss of opportunity, but also a loss of opportunity in your own self-growth to ignore all of that. But I have since come to the conclusion that I think you need to have one main platform that you go all in on that's really takes up a lot of your time and energy, at least comparatively, depending on how much other work you have. But then to have a little bit of presence as much as you can, just to keep things going on other platforms. So in my case, my main focus is, well, it's basically Twitter, but I'm also spending some time on YouTube, and I'm sharing a little bit here and there on Instagram. So I would say Twitter is probably the main one for me. And then I have the kind of like peripheral, you know, satellite platforms that I maintain just to keep those windows open.
So last question. If you're not writing or in illustration, what will you be doing instead of those two?
Writing an illustration. If I wasn't, so for making content or for work?
For work.
I think coaching is the one for me, but that's kind of cheating because I'm already doing it. Yeah, it's really hard because I enjoy all of those things and I'm pretty good at all of those things, which is kind of annoying for me. Like, I'm sure you can relate to being multi-talented. I'm not trying not to toot my own horn too much, but like it can be annoying because I'm pretty good at writing, pretty good at illustration, but I can't really do all of it at the same time. So yeah, you have to be really ruthless sometimes. So what I've done is I'm kind of evading your question, but I'm putting it all together in like a big ugly mess of like writing tweets. Sometimes I put illustrations out and I'll use my illustrations in my articles, and I will use my articles to promote my coaching, and I'll use my writing to promote my coach. So it's all one thing. If I wasn't doing any of that stuff, I'd probably be living in a forest, just being a survivalist, just like a kind of wild man. Just I'd let my beard grow out and go crazy. That would be the good life, actually, just to have I have this calling a lot of the time. Like I have one voice that says, oh, you should be creative and really go dive deep into social media. But there's another voice that says, quit all of it and go completely wild, completely minimal. I'm sure you've had thoughts like that.
Yeah, I think everybody has gone through one of those. Yeah, you just want to leave everything and just go to a cabin with your family and just stay there till you die or something.
Big time. And you see a lot of people on Money Twitter sharing that kind of stuff. Like, this is where I'd rather be.
Yeah.
The irony is that they're tweeting it, but I can totally relate. And it's a thought I think that probably comes up daily. It's like, oh man, I wish I could just go completely minimal.
It just shows,
might well happen.
It just shows how connected we are to our ancient selves, like the cavemen. We are connected to that. No matter how much you want to fight it, no matter how far civilization goes, no matter how you think about it, we are still connected to our caveman past.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah, man, it's in the psyche, the collective psyche.
Mm-hmm. It's been nice talking to you, man. Where
likewise, my friend.
Where can our my listeners actually see see some of your work? Where can they find you on the internet?
So there's one of about 700 sites that you can find me on, but I would suggest going to my main Twitter, which is I am Alex Mathers on Twitter. That's the Twitter handle. And alternatively, you can learn a bit more about me through my main website, which is alexmathers, mathers.net.
All right. Thank you for coming to the show, Alex.
It's been a pleasure, man. I've really enjoyed that.
Yeah,
Let's keep in touch.
Yeah, have a great day, man. Thank you for coming this far. My name is Tochko Koro. Find me on Twitter at Growthclinicc. Growthclinicc with 2 C's at the end. Or check my website at tochkokoro.com.